Sarah Mitchell sat by the window of the corner cafe, her fingers nervously smoothing the cream-colored sweater she'd borrowed from her sister. At 28, with blonde hair pulled back in a simple bun and kind blue eyes that reflected both hope and worry, she watched the autumn leaves drift past the glass. She checked her phone again. The dating app message was still there. A blind date. Her first one in 3 years, her best friend Emma had insisted. "You can't keep saying no to life, Sarah. One coffee? That's all?" Sarah had finally agreed, though her bank account had disagreed quite loudly. After paying this month's rent and her mother's medical bills, she had exactly $23 to her name until Friday. But it was just coffee. She could manage 1 cup. The cafe hummed with the comfortable sounds of afternoon life. The espresso machine hissed gently. Soft jazz played overhead. Golden light streamed through the windows, making everything feel warm and safe. Then he walked in. David Crawford was 42, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples and a well-tailored charcoal suit that spoke of success. But it was his eyes that caught Sarah's attention. They were tired eyes, kind eyes that had seen both triumph and loss. He spotted her immediately and smiled. Not the practiced smile of someone trying to impress, but something genuine and almost relieved. "Sarah?" he asked, approaching her table. "That's me," she said, standing up too quickly and nearly knocking over the small vase of flowers on the table. They both laughed, and some of the tension melted away. They ordered. Sarah asked for a simple cappuccino, ignoring the pastries that made her mouth water. David ordered the same, then added, "And 2 of those cinnamon scones, please." "Oh, I didn't," Sarah started. "My weakness," David said with a gentle smile. "I can never resist them, but I can never finish 2. Would you help me out?" It was such a small kindness, but Sarah felt her shoulders relax. They talked. Really talked. Not the surface conversation Sarah had dreaded, but real words about real things. David told her about his company, how he'd built it from nothing over 15 years. "Everyone thinks success is glamorous," he said, stirring his coffee slowly. "But mostly it's just a lot of late nights and cold dinners and wondering if you're doing any of it right." Sarah found herself opening up too. She told him about her job as a library assistant, how she loved connecting people with the right books. She mentioned carefully that things had been tight since her mother's illness, that she was an only child, and sometimes the weight of responsibility felt heavy. "My father had a stroke when I was 30, David said quietly. "I understand that weight, the wanting to fix everything and knowing you can't." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the kind that only comes from walking similar paths. An hour passed, then 2. The cafe began to fill with the early dinner crowd. Sarah glanced at her phone and felt her stomach drop. She'd lost track of time completely. They'd ordered 2 more coffees each. David had insisted on splitting a sandwich when she mentioned she'd skipped lunch. There were more pastries now, too. The bill would be far more than $23. Her face must have shown her panic because David tilted his head. "Everything okay?" Sarah wanted to disappear. This wonderful afternoon, this kind man, and she was going to have to admit she couldn't even afford a proper coffee date. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice small. "I didn't watch the time and She swallowed hard, fighting back tears of embarrassment. "I can't afford all this." She waited for his face to change, for disappointment or judgment or that particular look people get when they realize you're not who they thought you were. Instead, David reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Sarah," he said softly, "it's on me, all of it. And I'm not saying that to embarrass you or because I think you need rescuing. I'm saying it because this has been the best afternoon I've had in years, and I'd like to thank you for that." "You don't understand," Sarah said, tears spilling over now. "I should have told you before we even met. I'm broke, actually broke. I'm 28 and I can barely keep my head above water. I had no business coming here and—" "Stop," David said, not unkindly. "Please just stop." He pulled his hand back and looked out the window for a moment, gathering his thoughts. 10 years ago, he began, I sat in a diner with $4 in my pocket. I was meeting with a potential investor for my business. The meeting ran long. We ordered food. When the bill came, I had to tell him the truth, that I couldn't pay for my half. He turned back to Sarah, and his eyes were bright with memory. You know what he said? He said, "Good. That means you're hungry enough to make this work." He paid. He invested, and he became one of my dearest friends before he passed away 2 years ago. David signaled the waiter who brought over the check. Sarah couldn't see the total, but she watched David add a generous tip and hand over his card without hesitation. Before he died, David continued, he made me promise something. He said, "David, money's just paper. It comes and goes. But kindness, that's the only currency that grows when you spend it. Promise me you'll pay it forward." The waiter returned with the receipt, and David signed it with a flourish. "So no," he said, meeting Sarah's eyes. "You don't need to thank me. You're helping me keep a promise to a good man." They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe noise flowing around them like a gentle river. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah asked finally. "Of course. 3 years ago I was engaged. He left when my mom got sick. Said he didn't sign up for that kind of life." She looked down at her empty cup. "I stopped believing that good men existed. That real kindness was still out there." She raised her eyes to his. "Thank you for reminding me I was wrong." David smiled, and this time it reached all the way to his eyes. "I got divorced 5 years ago. My ex-wife said I worked too much, cared too much about everyone except her. For a long time, I thought maybe she was right. That maybe caring was my biggest flaw." He stood up and offered his hand to help Sarah from her chair. "But sitting here with you, talking about books and sick parents and all the real stuff nobody puts in their dating profile, this felt right. This felt like maybe caring isn't a flaw after all." They walked to the door together, stepping out into the cool evening air. The streetlights were just coming on, making the sidewalk glow. "Sarah," David said, "I'd like to see you again. Not because I paid for coffee or because you need help or any reason like that. Just because I'd really like to keep talking with you." Sarah felt something unlock in her chest, something that had been closed tight for 3 years. "I'd like that too," she said. "But next time we split the bill. When I get paid on Friday," David laughed, a warm sound that made passers-by smile. "Deal. How about Saturday? There's a bookstore cafe across town. We can argue about which novels deserve to be classics." "You're on," Sarah said. They exchanged numbers, and David walked her to her bus stop. He waited with her in comfortable silence until the bus arrived. As Sarah climbed aboard and found a seat by the window, she saw David still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching to make sure she got on safely. He waved. She waved back, smiling wider than she had in years. The bus pulled away, and Sarah leaned her head against the cool glass, thinking about kindness and coffee and how sometimes the best things happen when you're brave enough to show up, even when you're scared. Her phone buzzed. "A text from David, thank you for today, and thank you for letting me keep my promise." "Sleep well, Sarah," she typed back. "Thank you for reminding me that good men still exist. See you Saturday." Outside the window, the city lights blurred into a warm glow. Sarah thought about her mother, who would want to hear every detail. About Emma, who would squeal with delight. About the library books waiting to be shelved tomorrow, and how each one held someone's story, just like everyone walking these streets had their own. And she thought about David, sitting alone in that diner 10 years ago with $4, probably scared and uncertain, never knowing that someday he'd be the one saying, "It's on me. Life was funny that way." The help we receive becomes the help we give. The kindness shown to us becomes the kindness we show others. Around and around, like ripples on water spreading outward to touch shores we'd never imagine. Sarah closed her eyes and smiled. It had been a good day, a very good day indeed, and Saturday was only 5 days away.